Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
Pass Chuti Pack රුපියල් 37ක වාසියක්. දැන් රුපියල් 145යි.
හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Thursday the 15th of December 2022. Vietnam model. President Ranil Wickremesinghe highlights the need of changing the economy to attract more foreign direct investment in the country. Contraction. Sri Lankan economy has continued its downward spiral by contracting 11.8% during the third quarter of this year. Equity to all. State Minister of Finance Shayan Semasinghe reassures that all creditors will be treated equally following conclusion of third bilateral creditor meeting.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. Now in your top story for tonight, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that Sri Lanka should follow in the footsteps of Vietnam, which changed its economic communist policies following the Vietnam War to attract FDIs. Addressing an event coinciding with 70 years of Japan-Sri Lanka relations, President Wickremesinghe emphasized the need for an institutional system that can revive the country's economy and bring investment opportunities to the country.
The inauguration of the Toyota Lanka Fulfillment Centre in Kadawatha, coinciding with 70 years of Japan-Sri Lanka relations, was held yesterday under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Your show, your show, your show. Put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. The sake barrel has been...
This is an apt way of commemorating the 70 years of diplomatic relations between our two countries. This is the establishment, Toyota Lanka and the Fulfillment Centre. What has it done for us? It has brought us into the most advanced stage of the logistics of the motor industry. That is where knowledge comes from. Knowledge is the best gift that you can give a person. Knowledge is the best gift you can give a country. We have no doubt that this centre will expand, and this will be means of ensuring that there is more investment by Toyota in Sri Lanka. It will also pave the way for investments by Japanese firms. So I have to say thank you to Toyota for this contribution to our economy. And it's come at a time when it is badly needed, when this sign of confidence is also a sign that Sri Lanka will be going forward. Vietnam ලැබිලා තියෙන විදේශ ආයෝජනය $25 billion. ඒකට මග පෙන්වුවේ ලංකාවට මේ අවුරුද්දේ හම්බෙලා තියෙන්නේ $1 billion 1යි. අපි වියට්නාමයේ වාගේ දියුණු වුණා නම් මීට වඩා හොඳ ජීවන තත්ත්වයක් අපි හැම එක්කෙනාටම තියෙනවා. ඒත් අපිට ඒක නැති වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. මොකද ඒ අය වියට්නාම් යුද්ධයෙන් පස්සේ දැනගත්තා විශේෂයෙන්ම ඒ ආයෝජනය ලබා ගන්න ඒ කොමියුනිස්ට් ආර්ථිකය වෙනස් කරන්න උවමනයි කියලා. ඒ වෙනස ඇති කරා. ඒ වෙනස ඇති කරාම වැඩියෙන්ම ආවේ ඉස්සෙල්ලා ජපානයේ ආයෝජනය. කොරියාවෙන් ආවා, ඇමරිකාවෙන් ආවා, චීනෙන් ආවා. අපි යුද්ධයෙන් පස්සේ ආර්ථිකය වෙනස් කරේ නැහැ. ඒ විදිහටම ගියා. අද අපි මේ තත්ත්වයට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන බංකොලොත් රටක් හැටියට. ඒකෙන් අපි ගොඩ එන්න තියෙනවා. ඒ ණය උගුලෙන් බේරිලා මදි. ණය ගෙවන්න පුළුවන් ආර්ථිකයක් අපි ඇති කරන්න ඕනේ. වියට්නාම් ආර්ථිකයේ ෆෝමියුලා 1 රේසින් කාර් එකක් වාගේ. අපේ ආර්ථිකයේ තාම තිරෝධ රථයක් වාගේ. ඉතින් අපි එහෙනම් රේස් එකට යනවා නම් කොහොමද අපි දිනන්න තියෙන්නේ? එහෙනම් අපි රේසින් කාර් එකක් හොයාගන්න තියෙනවා. හොඳ එන්ජිමක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ මේකට සුදුසු තියෙන ආර්ථිකය. ඒ ආර්ථිකයේ ඉස්සන් එන්ජිම තමයි දැන් හදන්න ඉන්නේ. ඒ එන්ජිම හදන්න අපි ඉන්නේ මේ රටත් විවෘත ආර්ථිකයක් කළා සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම තරඟකාරී උපනයන ආර්ථිකයක් කළා ලෝකෙක තනග කරන්න. අපි ඔක්කොම එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරනවා. ඉතින් ආර්ථිකය වෙනස් කරන ගමන් මේ වැඩ කටයුතු කරන්න පුළුවන් ආයතන කීපයක් ඇති කරන්නේ. මම බලන්නේ දැන්ට ආයෝජන මණ්ඩලයේ ආයෝජන ප්‍රවර්ධන අංශයත් ඒ වගේම අපනයන සංවර්ධන මණ්ඩලයත් දෙකම ඒකාබද්ධ කරන්න. ඒකාබද්ධ කළා රටේ ආර්ථිකයට පණ ගන්නන්න පුළුවන් විශේෂයෙන්ම ආයෝජන ගේන ආර්ථික සංස්ථාව බවට පත් කරන්න. මේ තියෙන ආයෝජනට ඕන යටිතල පහසුකම්. ඒ නිසා ආයෝජකයන්ට උවමන යටිතල පහසුකම් ලබා දෙන්න කියලා ඒ ආයෝජන කලාප වෙන් කළා වෙනම සංස්ථාවක් ඇති කරගන්නවා. අක්කර 500ක් 1000ක් දාන්න ඉන්නේ ආර්ථික කලාප හැටියට.
Now, according to the Department of Census and Statistics, the Sri Lankan economy has continued its downward spiral by contracting 11.8% during the third quarter of this year. Releasing the National Accounts estimate on Sri Lanka for the third quarter of 2022, the Census Department highlighted that the overall agriculture industry and service activities declined by 8.7%, 21.2% and 2.6% respectively. These developments take place amid a gloomy economic outlook for the future worldwide.
The Department of Census and Statistics recently released the National Accounts estimates of Sri Lanka for the third quarter of 2022. Accordingly, the gross domestic product of Sri Lanka for the third quarter of year 2022 at constant prices has declined to 2.844 trillion rupees from 3.269 trillion rupees recorded in the third quarter of 2021, leading to 11.8% negative growth year-on-year. However, the report stated that the gross domestic product of Sri Lanka for the third quarter of 2022 at current prices increased up to 6.417 trillion rupees from 4.418 trillion rupees for the same quarter in 2021. Elaborating further on the 45.2% positive change in the current price GDP between the 2 years, the Department of Census and Statistics attributed the double-digit expansion to the influence of high inflation which persisted throughout the third quarter. On the performance of the individual sectors of the economy, the Department of Census and Statistics highlighted that during the third quarter, all three major economic activities, agricultural, industrial and services, recorded negative growth rates of 8.7%, 21.2% and 2.6% respectively.
Now, amid a dampening global economic outlook due to several macroeconomic and geopolitical reasons, the Asian Development Bank has trimmed its growth forecast for the developing economies of Asia. In the sub-regions of Asia, forecasts of the Southeast and Central Asian regions had upward revisions, while the East Asian forecasts slid mainly due to slowing down of the Chinese economy. The report also meanwhile made upward revisions in inflation expectations in Sri Lanka, while comparing the rate hikes implemented in the country against rate hikes elsewhere in the region.
The Asian Development Bank cut its growth forecasts for developing Asia for this year and the next as the region faces persistent headwinds from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, China's COVID-19 policies and a slowing global economy. The Manila-based lender said in a supplement to its Asian Development Outlook report, it expected 2022 growth in developing Asia to slow to 4.2%, down slightly from 4.3% forecast in September and marking the fifth time the outlook was downgraded. For next year, the combined bloc's economy, which includes China and India, is projected to grow by 4.6%, much slower than its previous projection of 4.9%. Growth in China will likely be slower than previously thought, with the second largest economy seen expanding 3% this year and 4.3% next year, weaker than the ADB's earlier forecasts of 3.3% and 4.5% respectively. Elaborating on the South Asian region, the report stated that the regional inflation projection has increased marginally for 2022 from 8.1% to 8.2% and more substantially for 2023 from 7.4% to 7.9%. The sub-regional revision for 2023 largely reflected high inflation forecasts for Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. According to the report, Sri Lankan GDP contracted by 1.6% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2022 and by 8.4% in the second quarter of 2022 as supply chain disruptions and shortages of essentials stemmed from an acute foreign exchange shortage raised in line with recent data showing inflation in its first 3 months to mid-October averaging 8.5% year-on-year, up from 4% a year earlier. Inflation forecasts for Sri Lanka are revised up for both 2022 and 2023, reflecting persistent market shortages, contractionary fiscal policy, intensifying external pressures and higher global energy and food prices. Reporting on the measures taken by the central banks of the region to combat inflation, the report highlighted that the Sri Lankan Central Bank had implemented the steepest rate hikes this year and the last.
The State Minister of Finance Shehans Semasinga said that he emphasized also rather on Sri Lanka will maintain an equal, comparable and transparent debt treatment policy with all its bilateral creditors. The minister made these statements on Twitter today following the conclusion of the third meeting between Sri Lanka's officials and the country's bilateral creditors. The State Minister appreciated the progressive and constructive engagements that had been made between the bilateral creditors. Now, the National Council Subcommittee on Identifying Progress related to Economic Stabilization says Sri Lanka is lagging behind other countries in the world due to the lack of a national digital policy. During a meeting due to discuss issues faced by the IT sector, the sector officials said the ongoing economic crisis is affecting them as most of their workforce is leaving the country.
A meeting to discuss the issues related to the IT sector organized by the National Council Subcommittee on Identifying Short and Medium-Term Programs related to the economic stabilization was held recently with the participation of public and private sector IT experts, heads of government institutions and heads of private IT companies in Parliament. During the meeting, discussions were made on the obstacles to prepare a new network that connects all government institutions under the concept of e-governance. IT professionals also pointed out that many of the sector professionals are leaving the island due to the ongoing economic crisis. Suggestions were made on the possibility of making ICT a compulsory subject in the new school education reforms. While pointing out that Sri Lankan IT experts are of high quality, it was emphasized that the amount of foreign currency inflows to the country can be increased by directing these professionals to employ in the US and the UK companies without letting them leave the country. Further attention was also drawn to the difficulties faced by small-scale IT companies due to the ongoing power cuts. The experts also pointed out the need for Export Development Board to prepare a program to reduce export transportation costs such as shipping charges, postage and courier charges for small-scale sellers.
The Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Vijayasekara signed a Memorandum of Understanding for Nuclear Energy Cooperation with the Russian State Nuclear Energy Corporation, Roston, today. The MOU was signed at the Russian Embassy in Colombo. During this, Minister Kanchana had visited the embassy and held discussions on energy sector requirements and held with the Russian ambassador Lavan Zagaryan. They had also carried out discussions on the fuel requirements, refinery operations, challenges in coal supply. Now, the Minister of Health and Water Supply, Kehelia Ramakwela, says Sri Lanka needs a greater support from all donor agencies than ever in the near 75 years since independence to recover from the ongoing crisis, adding that all funds provided now will be utilized well for innovations and will not be wasted. He made these comments addressing the International Water Conference yesterday. Meanwhile, Director of the Urban Development and Water Division of the South Asia Department of the Asian Development Bank, Norio Saito, says that Sri Lankan water supply needs to be increased while factoring the issue of climate resilience.
International Water Conference Sri Lanka 2022, organized by the National Water Supply and Drainage Board, was held yesterday under the theme Water for Sustainable Development Cooperation, Partnership and Appropriate Technology.
The NWSDB has positioned itself to face the global challenges through knowledge-sharing initiatives, networking, technology transfer, training capacity development by opening its doors to international arena. The NWSDB aspires to become the regional knowledge hub in water and sanitary.
We are getting a lot of assistance from a lot of donor agencies. And as you know, that Sri Lanka, in the history for the first time, we have taken the worst downturn of economy. And therefore, the assistance that are forthcoming from all the agencies are more welcome than the normal 75 years of post-independence. This is the ideal and the vital time that we need your assistance to the maximum, and we will assure you that it will not go waste. It will put to the best use, and we will have more innovations and more innovative things, and we will have all our people clean drinking water, and that's our target. And I'm sure we will be able to achieve that.
It is relevant to mention that ADB aspires to become Asia's climate bank and elevated its ambition to achieve $100 billion in climate financing from its own resources cumulatively from 2019 to 2030. The water supply coverage and availability in the country need to increase while incorporating climate resilience. There is a need for water operating entities to improve their performance, to be self-sustainable and lessen their dependence on central government budget allocations. Water supply systems will become more sustainable through improved financial sustainability and business efficiency, increased institutional capacity, better regulatory mechanism, enhanced environmental safeguards, and gender equality and social inclusion. In addition, the water sector needs to be greener and more resilient by enhancing energy efficiency, adopting renewable energy, and incorporating climate change impacts into the design and operation of the water supply systems. Enhancing the private sector participation and promoting public-private partnership would help the country recover from the current economic situation. ADB stands ready to collaborate with the government in advancing these initiatives through technical and financial support. ADB has already started the dialogue with the government, including the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Water Supply, Water Board, and other key stakeholders.
Now, following the interim order issued by the Court of Appeal suspending the inclusion of doctors in the Gazette notification on compulsory retirement of government sector employees, Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena has issued a Gazette notification extraordinary, amending the retirement age of consultant doctors, government medical officers, dental surgeons and registered medical officers of the government. The new retirement age for these sectors will now be at 69 years of age.
Recently, the government issued a Gazette notification dated the 5th of December 2022 declaring that it is compulsory for public sector employees to retire by the age of 60 years. Subsequent to this announcement, 176 specialist doctors filed a writ application requesting the Court of Appeals to issue an interim order against the inclusion of government doctors and specialist doctors in the Gazette notification. Taking the application into consideration, the Court of Appeals issued the interim order excluding government doctors from being bound by the compulsory retirement age of 60 years until the 25th of January. Accordingly, Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena issued an extraordinary Gazette notification dated the 12th of December 2022 with interim provisions amending the retirement age of doctors, specialists and dental surgeons. As per the Gazette, medical officers who have already completed the age of 63 years should retire before the 31st of December 2022, while medical officers who have already completed the age of 62 years should retire upon completion of 63 years. Furthermore, the Gazette notification mentioned that medical officers who have already completed the age of 61 years should retire upon completion of 62 years of age, while medical officers who have already completed the age of 60 years should retire upon the completion of 61 years of age. Finally, the Gazette mentioned that medical officers who have already completed the age of 59 years should retire upon completion of 60 years of age. However, medical consultants, government medical officers, dental surgeons and registered medical officers of the government whose birthdays fall within the period of 1st of January and the 30th of June will be given the opportunity to serve until the 30th of June of the relevant year before sending them on retirement. Meanwhile, medical consultants, government medical officers, dental surgeons and registered medical officers of the government whose birthdays fall within the period of 1st of July to the 31st of December will be allowed to serve until the 31st of December before they retire. These interim provisions will be in effect until the 31st of December 2023.
Now, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said today that the WHO hopes they will be able to remove the COVID-19 virus from the status of global health emergency by next year. The WHO stated that many of the deaths still taking place in the world are reported among people who have not received proper vaccination.
Last week, less than 10,000 people lost their lives. That's still 10,000 too many. And there is still a lot that all countries can do to save lives. But we have come a long way. We're hopeful that at some point next year, we will be able to say that COVID-19 is no longer a global health emergency.
Although you did hear the DG say we still see between 8,000 and 10,000 deaths reported each week. These deaths are largely happening among people who are not vaccinated or haven't received the full number of doses that are recommended for them. So we feel there's much more work to be done. So the Emergency Committee will be looking at the impact of the virus in various settings in the context of other circulating pathogens, in the context of war, in the context of other crises that they're facing, droughts, floods, etc.
Now, the Rotary International and the UNICEF handed over $130,000 worth of medicines under the Lifeline project of the Ministry of Health today. The medicines were urgently procured by the UNICEF with funds raised by Rotary's global network and alumni through an online donation platform to help Sri Lanka.
The Rotary International President Jennifer Jones and UNICEF representative for Sri Lanka Christian Skoog handed over $130,000 or 47 million rupees worth of medicines under the Lifeline project to the Minister of Health Keheliya Ramukwala to help the delivery of Sri Lanka's health services.
man-made and natural disasters and crisis. It is an unprecedented time in our world where we're seeing so many different things that are happening across the planet. And one of the things that we all know is that in terms of food security, which is something you've been dealing with, and with vital medicine that is needed, it's a human right, and it's one that we need to take incredibly seriously. And so the ability for us to be able to enter into an agreement, certainly with UNICEF, to be able to procure the kinds of medicines that are needed, and then to be able to work with our partner here with the ministry to be able to disseminate right to the front line.
We should not compromise for the health sector. Say if it's a highways, we could put them off for another year, something else. But when it came to food and health, we were not in a position to sort of put them off or to have any compromises. So instead we thought that we will stretch out to all our friends around the world, and I must be fair by everybody. I think who we wanted came out very generously and helped us.
On the Colombo Bourse today, Sri Lankan shares fell today as profit-taking entered the market mainly on banking and diversified financial sectors. The main all-share price index closed 0.64% higher at 8,813.84. The more liquid index S&P SL20 closed 1.9% or 30.84 points lower at 2,809.72. So far in December, the ASPI gained 1.8%. And the market has witnessed a turnover of 2.2 billion rupees, lower than this year's daily average turnover of 2.9 billion rupees. The market saw net foreign inflow of 553 million rupees. In the meantime, Sampath Bank pulled down the index to close at 2.4%, lower at 36 rupees and 1 cent. Commercial Bank fell 2.3% to close at 51 rupees and a cent. And LOLC closed 2.5% low at 442 rupees a share. Now, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said yesterday that the Federal Reserve will deliver more interest rate next year even as the economy slips towards a possible recession, arguing that a higher cost would be paid if the US Central Bank does not get a firmer grip on inflation. The US Fed rate hike comes amid deliberations and implementations of similar hikes by central banks around the world, including England, where rates now stand at 3.5%, with more hikes to come.
Recent signs of slowing inflation have not brought any confidence yet that the fight has been won, Powell told reporters after the Fed's policy-setting committee raised its benchmark overnight interest rate by 0.5 percentage point and projected it would continue rising to above 5% in 2023, a level not seen since a steep economic downturn in 2007. Those rises in borrowing costs would come despite an economy that Fed officials projected will operate at near stall speed through next year, with an annual growth rate of 0.5% and an unemployment rate nearly a full percentage point higher by the end of 2023, well beyond the increase historically associated with a recession. He described the slow rate of economic growth penciled in by Fed officials next year as still modest. But other aspects of Fed's projections, notably a rise in unemployment rate to 4.6% from the current 3.7%, are consistent with the downturn settling in as the central bank keeps its target policy rate at a restrictive level for at least the next 2 years. The rate increase yesterday, which was approved unanimously by Fed policymakers and widely expected by financial markets, lifted the target policy rate to 4.25% to 4.5% range, with officials expecting it to rise to a level between 5% to 5.25% next year.
Now let's take a look at how the rupee fared against other major currencies in the world. And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.
For news news and information you can trust 24 hours a day. Visit AdaDerana.lk.